This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. As we turn to India, where tens of thousands of farmers are converging on the capital city of New Delhi by tractor and on foot to demand the repeal of new laws that deregulate agricultural markets. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says the measures give farmers more freedom to set their own prices and sell directly to corporate buyers. But opponents say the neoliberal policies are a boon to corporations and roll back key labor and crop price protections that could have a devastating impact on the livelihood of farmers. Agriculture is the leading source of income for more than half of India's 1.3 billion population. The ongoing protests come after a nationwide demonstration Thursday when an estimated 250 million workers, farmers, and their allies joined in what's believed to be the largest organized strike in history anywhere in the world.
भी जो है अपना सिस्टम मंडी करना है वो कायम रखना चाहेंगे। उसे अगर वो टूट गया तो ये प्राइवेट कंपनी है, ये हमें कोई अच्छा रेट थोड़ी देंगी, ये अपनी मनमर्जी करेंगी, हमसे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेंगी, हाँ ये रेट लेना देना दो नहीं देना आपकी मर्जी, ये तो हमारे हाथ काटने वाला काम कर रहे हैं।
पूरे आंदोलन कराएंगे, बराबर कराएंगे, जो भी लड़की है, बीबी है, जो भी बहन भाई हैं, किसानों के साथ मरेंगे, किसानों के साथ जीवेंगे, जिन्ना चेर ये वापस नहीं लेंदा कभी भी घर नहीं बैठेंगे।
What's happening in India, the largest democracy on earth, is really quite remarkable, and it hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention in the American press. For the past couple weeks, India has been shut down by the largest general strike in human history. A whopping 250 million people have joined the call to strike, as 31 trade unions, workers' federations, and farmers' groups have banded together to stop Prime Minister Narendra Modi's latest round of neoliberal reforms. And at the heart of the movement are India's farmers, who have marched en masse to the capital of New Delhi and essentially shut down traffic into the city by blocking the major highways. Yeah, and the basic demand is the repeal of this series of laws that were rammed through the parliament by Modi's party, the BJP, which essentially deregulate the agricultural sector by removing price guarantees and allowing Indian farmers more choice to sell to whomever they want on the private market. And it's hard to overstate just how awful these so-called reforms are. According to the New York Times, many farmers said the new rules, which the Modi administration pushed through Parliament in September, are the beginning of the end of a decades-old system that had guaranteed minimum prices for certain crops. They allow farmers greater freedom to sell their produce outside state-controlled agricultural markets, but they also curtail farmers' ability to challenge disputes in courts. While the Modi administration has said that India's farm policies need to be reformed to attract more investment, farmers say they were never consulted on the changes. Several who were interviewed on Monday spoke of their fear of being swallowed up by corporate titans such as Mukesh Ambani, India's richest man, and Gautam Adani, who is not far behind, both known to be close to Mr. Modi. And over half of India's population rely on farming to make a living. They understand what neoliberalism has done to farmers in places like Mexico and even the United States. The freedom of the market is basically a license for giant agribusiness to take over and push people off the land. It is a threat to their very way of life. And one of the reasons why many of India's non-farm workers joined in is because Modi also rammed through a series of even broader anti-worker reforms.
But people are returning to much worse conditions as workers. We have tampered with the gold standard of labor law, which used to be 8 hours a day. Now you can have 12 hours a day without overtime for the last 4 hours. It'll be at a pro rata thing. You are having a massive, massive class divide in what's happening, with the top 0.01% adding phenomenally to its wealth and a huge amount of distress at the bottom end.
And that suite of laws remarkably immunize the government and corporations from any lawsuit.
Not only have they rammed through these laws, on prices, on contract farming, on essential commodities, they have included this clause in one of the most important of these laws. It says, no suit, no prosecution, or other legal proceedings shall lie against the central government or the state government or any other person or any officer of the central government or any officer of the state government or any other person in respect of anything, read corporations, I mean, read corporations in brackets, or any other person in respect of anything which is done in good faith or intended to be done in good faith under this act, and no civil court shall have jurisdictions to entertain any suit or proceedings in respect of any matter connected to the actions under this law. Have you read many laws like that in a democratic country?
Yeah, let's just make it impossible to sue the government or literally any corporation as long as they claim they didn't mean to do the awful thing that they actually ended up doing. Now, India's Narendra Modi has often been compared to figures like Trump here in the US or Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, the elected leaders of the second and fourth largest democracies in the world, coincidentally, in that they all adopt a sort of nationalistic, xenophobic rhetoric that is used to disguise by the book neoliberal economic policies. For example, Trump, for all his bluster, his only real major legislation was a giant tax cut for the wealthy. Modi is no different. His leadership has been marked by increasing vitriol against India's Muslim minority, which plays to a growing sense of Hindu nationalism. Writing in Jacobin, Amol Singh writes, "The BJP, which is Modi's party, established itself on the Indian political scene, basing its appeal on three issues: the building of the Ram Mandir temple on the site of the Babri Masjid Mosque, supposedly located at the birthplace of the god Rama, the withdrawal of autonomy from the Muslim majority state of Kashmir, and the promulgation of a universal civil code intended to victimize Christian and Muslim minorities. The BJP consolidated itself as the major electoral power to inaugurate the second hegemonic period. As neoliberal capitalism took root in India and state intervention in the economy receded, popular support for Congress, which is the left-of-center party, declined sharply. The BJP's version of nationalism served as a pan-class social glue, providing India's capitalist economy with a stable polity." And this all came to the forefront last year when Modi and the BJP passed a new citizenship law designed to ban Muslims, which sparked massive protests.
Protesting is the basic foundation of democracy. We are upholding the basic principles of democracy. No one should stop us from protesting.
You don't think so? The police presence intimidates you at all?
No, they've scared us so much that there's no more fear of them.
These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested by the Delhi police for protesting against the amendment bill.
At the root of the anger is the new law by India's Hindu nationalist government that gives citizenship to minority communities from Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. But Muslims have been left off that list. A decision the protesters argue is discriminatory and against the spirit of the Indian Constitution. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has defended the law, accusing the opposition of spreading lies and encouraging violence.
Now, see if that sounds familiar. Modi and the BJP foreground cultural issues while passing your standard issue privatization and deregulation laws in the background. And like the United States, India is not a very heavily unionized country. Only 10.7% of India's workers are unionized, and in the United States it's 10.3%. And India's labor movement, like much of the labor movement around the world, has been in retreat for a long time now. For the first few decades after India got independence from the British in 1947, India's first Prime Minister Nehru and his left-of-center party, the Indian National Congress, instituted what's called a mixed economy with entire industrial sectors run by the government. That led to massive trade unions. But in the 1980s, India adopted neoliberalism, like much of the rest of the world, and began introducing market reforms. And this has been devastating for the trade union movement. A report by the International Labor Organization shows just how stark the decline was. These aggregate numbers hide different trends for different groups, according to the report. Union density among salaried workers has fallen precipitously since 1993-94 by 17.7 percentage points, while it has increased for casual workers and among self-employed workers. There have been some attempts at unionizing workers in the informal economy, especially among home-based workers, either to negotiate for minimum wages or to demand for better conditions. But despite the fact that India's union density stands at a paltry 10%, but because the country has over 1 billion people, that is still a shit ton of people in absolute terms. And they showed what they can achieve if they exercise their power. So what changed? Why now? Well, the obvious answer is the pandemic. Modi's response to the pandemic has been abysmal. As of this week, India has had over 9 million confirmed COVID cases and over 140,000 confirmed deaths, and that number is surely much, much higher. And the economic situation is equally dire. This is from Al Jazeera, according to official figures released on Friday, India's gross domestic product, GDP, contracted by 7.5% in the second quarter, an improvement on the previous quarter's record-breaking 23.9% fall. With 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, India has now formally entered a recession, even as it shows signs of improvement. But when you dig a little deeper, you see this little tidbit. A November report from India's central bank showed a 35% surge in net profits for non-financial firms, but analysts warn this is a result of cost-cutting rather than strong demand. Among other measures, companies are lowering their wage bills. Uday Tharar, an emerging markets economist at the investment firm GMO, told Al Jazeera. That means the recovery that we saw in August and September is not translating into benefits for employees. And the government's total lack of a COVID response and the worsening economic situation has destabilized its politics to the point where we are now seeing these historic work strikes. And if they can do it in India, a massive, complex country with many different ethnicities, we can do it here.